Good day, everyone. Welcome to the inaugural podcast of CDH, H2 Dialogue, Fueling the Future. It's about hydrogen and its derivative products and projects that will be developed in South Africa and more broadly, the African continent. And I'm welcome to have one of the leading developers in South Africa, green eFuels producer, Chris Heinermann, who is the co-founder and Chief Commercial Officer for GeFP, who is busy with an innovative circular economy project in the hydrogen derivative projects or products space. So welcome, Chris, in joining us for this first inaugural discussion.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks.
So, Chris, obviously we're talking about specifically methanol, and we're talking about the project that you are currently busy with in the south of Gauteng, in the Vaal region, the Vaal SEZ in particular, which is called the Green Hydrogen Methanol Corridor. And that project is meant to be a catalyst project, both in Gauteng, but more broadly, South Africa linking KZN and ultimately producing e-methanol. So Chris, if you can maybe provide us a bit more context about this project that you're busy with.
Yeah, as you mentioned, this is now something you want to publish, and we're talking about the green hydrogen industry and give a bit more transparency to the audience on where green hydrogen plays a role for South Africa, and where the projects in the green hydrogen industry play a role and can have an impact on South Africa. Obviously, initially, when you look into this, and for example, the just energy transition, there's a lot of talk about the economical impact, the economic development that those projects could bring. We, with our projects, are positioned in Gauteng, which I think it's a unique positioning, because the green hydrogen industry, which I call the green hydrogen-based industry, and the derivatives typically drive through the opportunity of export. And export means that we need derivatives like ammonia and methanol to whether carry the hydrogen or deliver the hydrogen products in a form that they are used in applications. And those applications we call PTX, power to X applications. So usually those are the eFuels. And they are eFuels because they are produced by the green electrons, by the renewables. We need renewables as an input for the power of those and operation of those projects. And then we have different feedstocks or inputs to then produce the derivatives, whether ammonia or methanol. And as you mentioned, we went the methanol route, and I think we will discuss a bit more about the opportunity on the methanol side because of the need for the feedstock and the circular architecture that we are using. There are very particular, I think, benefits. Obviously, there are everywhere challenges and benefits in projects, and also the discussion about the size of projects and how to make projects actually bankable, right?
Yeah, no, definitely, Chris. And I think maybe an important thing to also clarify for the general listeners is when we talk about hydrogen, because there's a big discussion around green hydrogen and then the molecule, the derivative product being either e-methanol, and your project specifically focuses on e-methanol or ammonia, and why Gauteng in particular, because we know that for hydrogen production generally there's a requirement that you need to have water, and most of those projects are actually located at the coast. And why, if you look at Gauteng in the context of our industrialization or deindustrialization, what makes this project so significant for the province?
Yeah, so again, on the hydrogen industry, the expectations are high. I mean, we have in South Africa the green hydrogen commercialization strategy that is already signed off since 2023.
Correct.
And the green hydrogen society roadmap. And then obviously it leads or reaches into the just energy transition agenda as well. So with the high level numbers, I mean, there's talks about 600,000 jobs that could be created in that industry, in that new industry. Obviously, on the back of, as you mentioned, reindustrialization or the problems that we have in South Africa with unemployment, that's why there's a huge focus on, can this industry really bring that level of employment and economic growth and investment. But investments and the influx of hopefully the investment that we need into the country is also driven by the need for the products that we can produce and to produce those products in the international environment competitively and according to certifications of different markets. You know, the challenging parts in the projects now, I see they are very multidimensional. That's just on the technical side. But then we also have different dimensions on the legal side, and even financing them, especially when it comes to the offtake, because the products in principle not new. The ammonia or methanol, they're not new products. They're dealt globally. They're commodities. They're in the market. But now, what are the premiums or what are the price differentiators on the green side of those products and the certifications? Obviously, there are different level of requirements in the markets like Europe or America or Japan. So those are things we have to look at. And when we started off and thinking about the green hydrogen in general, we also thought, you see that most of the focus is in the coastal provinces because of the requirement for transport or to export. So to be close to a port seemed to be
one of the
or described to be important.
Yes.
To have the renewables around you somehow. I mean, in South Africa, we have them around us, the solar, the wind. But you cannot always have everything ring-fenced around you. And the next level is as well the grid connectivity. So logistics, grid connectivity. We know that we have the resources in general. I mean, in South Africa, we have resources in terms of the renewables. We have space to build those projects. We even have capacity in the industry and skill levels of people that we could deploy into the projects. But obviously, there's an element of, some talk about the hydrogen academies and then look at new skill sets because of the hydrogen industry. There's definitely a good portion of that, but a lot of trades are still the trades that we need in our industry in terms of even the historical industries in terms of construction and even the operation of a chemical plant, the operation on the renewable side. So for us, when we looked into it and decided to go the methanol route, it obviously had to do with our partners, which we maybe talk later about how we got to our partner and the structure of partnership with, in particular, the German partners and also the interaction between the stakeholders. You get involved into a project, whether locally and then internationally. But we saw that methanol needing the unavoidable CO2 source, the feedstock, had a particular opportunity for us because we take the CO2 from the wastewater, from wastewater treatment centers. We see the sewage sludge or need the sewage sludge as feedstock. And when we looked into that and thinking about South Africa as a water scarce country, even in Gauteng, to develop a project that can use, I call it compromised water. So water use in our project that doesn't compete with the residential use or competes with any other commercial use because we already short on water sources and our water infrastructure has problems as well. Then we looked at that and thought it's a very interesting scenario to build a project that through the circular architecture with the feedstock that is used, which in many municipalities is a problem today, and that we could actually take off a burden, let's call it, from municipalities and communities, and use the waste into a project as a value in our project, but helps to reduce environmental issues in the community, helps to take off that type of waste from the municipality. That circular architecture we found very intriguing, and that's why we engaged further, and we saw the opportunity to do that in Gauteng. The next aspect you mentioned, the SEZs, to place the project into an SEZ. There are different benefits to go into an SEZ. You know the trades benefits and the maybe tax benefits and the incentives of an SEZ. But for a project developer, it was also interesting for us to be in an SEZ because the SEZ is pre-zoned. You already, when you go into the SEZ, you are on industrial zoned land. The basics of the EIA, the basic permits and activities that you're usually responsible for as a project developer, they're fast tracked. There are certain fast tracking opportunities on the licensing and permitting, because we mentioned the multidisciplinary nature of those projects now. So those projects draw a huge list of permits and licensing. Yes. And that's why we're talking to you as well, to actually look into the legal and regulatory side. And there are many levels now on the project side to look into those permits and licensing, specific on the electrical, obviously the renewables. We know, there's a lot of experience in South Africa on the solar side, now on the wind side of the project development, on the renewables. Obviously, we have chemical industry today as well. Chemical plants are in the country, and we know how to build them. We know how to operate them. But to combine those aspects now in terms of the environmental impacts, in terms of the feedstock that we now require, and biomass could also again be a compromise when biomass is used from areas where it could compete with food production. So if I have certain areas now to grow biomass to produce a fuel, and it competes with food production potentially, it's not desirable from our side, because because from the standardization we really want to make sure that it is an unavoidable waste. We're using an unavoidable waste. It brings more benefits into the local community as well by taking that waste and so turning it into value. But then again, the bankability, or really the drive to then get the projects into a financial structure is obviously the offtake. And there again, we have to look into the local portion and the international portion.
I think it's important maybe for the listeners also to understand some of the key aspects you've now mentioned. So in the circular economy, there's of the different elements that you've touched on in this whole ecosystem, if we can call it that. So we have the municipalities who play a key role because they have the wastewater treatment facilities, and we're talking about wastewater treatment facilities where you will get the sludge or the waste product, essentially. That waste product you will then utilize as feedstock, as you said, for the production of methanol or e-methanol, not just methanol. And then the hydrogen, maybe just to explain to the listeners the different specific components of this, the waste, the production of the hydrogen, the e-methanol. Obviously, you need green power, either wheeling it in or producing it yourself on site.
Yeah, exactly. So first of all, to produce green methanol or to produce any green fuel, we need green energy. There we talk about green power. So those are the green electrons we mentioned before. As I said, you not always have the opportunity to ring fence a project completely, to have wind and solar on your site, or at least adjacent to your site, but it's preferred. Obviously, if we can do that together. But then also for the whole environment of the development of for the industry, we have to look at all the wind projects and solar projects that are developed and see how they can feed in, or we could wheel clean energy to the projects. Because otherwise we would only have maybe one big center, and everything, and the benefit will only be in that big center of hydrogen development. With now the sewage sludge and from the wastewater treatment as a feedstock, as you mentioned, we looking at the municipalities that are connected or in where the SEZs are located, and we have the blueprint in the Waal SEZ, and that's why obviously we did tests and we looked at volumes and quality of sludge in the area, and we're talking to the operators of those centers in the area. The uniqueness is now for Gauteng, because we don't for the water use to split water into hydrogen and oxygen. Then again, for methanol, bringing the CO2, the CO2 source in, and then synthesize the green hydrogen and the CO2 to methanol. In our architecture, actually, we have two pathways of the product. There's a pathway that directly from the waste is still a biomethanol pathway. But as I mentioned before, the biomethanol is not from biomass. It's from an unavoidable waste. So that's why it's an advanced biomethanol product. And the other route through the electrolyzer, splitting water and then produce a hydrogen, the green hydrogen, through the electrolyzer. And then again, the methanol with the synthesis produces a green e-methanol. And then obviously the markets internationally and locally are looked at and to see what kind of markets then are interested. And at the moment, you will see the maritime industry as at least agreed pathway on the IMO regulations, IMO regulations on the requirements for the green fuels in the maritime sector, but also the aviation towards the aviation, sustainable aviation fuel, and so on. There are markets with volumes that are huge in terms of the productions that not only South Africa then will feed in, but obviously other countries position themselves as well in the space. But again, with our projects, we really see the opportunity for Gauteng, because we have the sources and the inputs that we need for our project in the province. Even if we have to wheel in wind, for example, and we mix on the renewable side solutions on behind the meter solution, where we have the renewable source close to us or with us to produce ourselves, and then we wheel the other portion of the renewable into the project. So this again on the South African side, it's an interesting aspect of the regulations that are available and can be used, like the wheeling concept, and the power purchase agreements that you then have with traders or other IPPs to feed in. And that's important for those hydrogen projects, because not everyone will just have the renewable next to the project. And I think for the whole industry, it's also important that interaction works.
There's ability to wheel
between the projects that already produce green electricity, but then according to certification, again, we like to have additionality, we call it. We like to have projects develop with the green hydrogen industry as well. So the industry will also develop more solar and wind projects. We are talking about more than 40 gigawatts of green power that would be used to really power the green hydrogen space. And that's where then also the large number of jobs again comes from. But in Gauteng, with the inputs that we need, we see that at first through our architecture as well, we can actually deploy a smaller footprint of projects to make it feasible on a smaller footprint of about 20 megawatts of energy demand, where you can almost imagine that if I'm starting off with a project that needs a gigawatt, it's more challenging in terms of our grid infrastructure at the moment, because the projects will still connect to the grid. There will still be interaction with the grid, because each project will not just produce exactly the volume of green electricity that the project needs. Because of the intermittent nature of wind and solar, you typically over-design, you over-engineer the renewable side. That means there's electricity available that can be sold on top of the own consumption of the project. That again brings us green electricity and green energy into our grid, and can help in the energy transition as well, because of those volumes, the gigawatts we discussed. But starting small also means in Gauteng that we don't see grid limitations on that level. Where we could start with 20 megawatts, not in Gauteng. We still have capacity available. And then also on the logistics sides. We mentioned the inputs now, the water, which comes out of the sludge, and the CO2.
Correct.
We get both out of the feedstock. Then the electricity. We discussed the power, the green power. But then when we have the product, we need to obviously transport it, sell it, get it to the market. And there, the proximity to the port was always mentioned, which is obviously very important for large projects, because if we have now to transport 100,000 of tons of those derivatives across the country, then it adds to the cost of the product being exported into another market. And in a smaller scale, I think we also have the opportunity to show that we can produce, we can bring the product to the port, at least at the moment with methods that don't have scalability issues. But then when we sold the product and we prove that the market is there, and then we start to scale, we obviously have to stay close to the logistic solutions as well, like Transnet and rail development, to then see how the rail development supports the industry as well, or needs to support the industry and the transport of those products. And otherwise, obviously, some projects will be placed at the coastal environment. Mostly the ammonia projects. But that's why we feel that the methanol opportunity with the feedstocks and the inputs we need, they are available in Gauteng. And then with that availability and the positioning and the SEZ, especially in the Vaal region as well, it's an opportunity for a reindustrialization. Right?
Of Gauteng. Thanks, Chris. I think one important point is, okay, if we talk about, now I'm talking about your company specifically now, so Green eFuels produces, and the potential impact that this project has on Gauteng and more broadly South Africa from a reindustrialization perspective. So this is the last point you've made. For a project of this scale, you need a lot of partners also. So partners to support you, whether it's government from a policy perspective and incentives, whether it is technology partners, the German partners, and also other foreign governments' support. So can you maybe unpack that a bit more in terms of how you unlocked that?
Yeah, when we looked at this from the start, the idea around a project like this was the opportunity to going from the green electrons to the green molecules. I mean, that's for me always a base of explanation, where we understand the production of the green electrons. We discussed the solar and wind, even if we would have hydropower opportunities. But the green electrons are traded in the domestic environment because you're in a grid. So you trade and deal with the usage and maybe the storage and trading of the electrons domestically. And when we looked into the energy transition and the need for the energy transition because of the climate change, which is globally, and again, our problems with waste, and then also the economic development. As a German living in South Africa now for 20 years, I look back to Germany and looked at what Germany maybe looks for and what are the opportunities out of the requirements from German markets, but also what benefit then does it bring South Africa. And I realized that Germany as a technology provider, Germany also sees an opportunity to bring technology into the projects in terms of technology transfer, some obviously technology export from the German perspective to bring the technology into the projects, but then also look at the project as a supplier of the green molecules once we now produce the green fuels to bring the green molecules back to Europe or to Germany for their energy transition. And I realized that obviously the drive through the green hydrogen industry to support the energy transition on that side, that Europe will be only capable to produce about 75% of the green fuel that market needs for their energy transition. So they will import 25%. So there's clearly an export opportunity, and the markets on that side have the directives and have the agreements and regulations that qualify for a premium, that allow to sell the green fuels for a premium in those markets, which right now here, most of the off-takers in South Africa would look at the green aspect of the product much secondary. For sure. Maybe a bit in the future, obviously, when the regulations get stronger on the carbon tax and so on. Or if you have, obviously, if the industry in South Africa would have off-takers internationally, like the discussion about green steel. If the requirement for green steel would be there, and then you are forced to look into your green sources, the incentives, then the incentive is there locally as well. But still, we try to strike a balance of the benefits that the international side is looking for. The benefit for us is that actually that offtake then makes the project bankable, and those markets are also willing to provide platforms of incentives or grants into early projects, because the whole economy globally is looking at the ramp up. How do we ramp up that industry? So in our project, we looked on both sides. We did partnerships and applied for partnerships in Germany. Initially, we were accepted as a project for a partnership called the consortium or consortia development, where we looked for technology partners. As I said, Germany may look for export opportunities or opportunities to bring technology into the project. That we did. We got accepted and we found our partners and focused on the green methanol, as we discussed before, in the circular architecture. Furthermore, there are platforms like H2Up, so Hydrogen Up. It's a ramp up platform as well, a grant that you can apply for with a technology partner or with German partners. So the application went through our German partner, And we're now working on work packages in the H2Up grant through the H2Up grant platform. And then also in South Africa, Germany and South Africa have already established partnerships on the energy side. We have SAGEN, the South African-German Energy Partnership. We have platforms like H2Up, also the PTX Hub in South Africa, all executed or mandated, let's say, through the GIZ, which is a private organization, but working very closely with German government in implementing these platforms. You may have some other guests in the future on that side to discuss their grant funding application opportunities and how to apply for specific programs. The GIZ also has developed a green hydrogen community development toolkit, which we are piloting in the project, which is one aspect that is really important to mention on how to include community and how to make sure how the project benefits the local community. I mean, I mentioned some aspects because of our offtake or our feedstock that there may be not only, I mean, there are environmental benefits that we're trying to bring into the community, but obviously the economic aspect is important. And that's why our project also has to partner with local stakeholders. And
that's key.
Also, again, you have multidisciplinary environments there because our stakeholders are public and private. And the public stakeholders, as you mentioned before, we are now in a municipal environment. There are specific rules in how to engage with public sector. And some of those rules, which has been or has seen, we have seen in the PPA environment or in the environment of the solar and wind developments, for example, where municipalities implement IPP programs, and then how to structure and make the IPP programs bankable. And why is that challenging, or is still a discussion that is ongoing? Because obviously PPAs are projects like infrastructure projects, whether only on the renewable side or now with the green e-fuels, they need long-term commitments, long-term contracts, and those structures obviously have to be discussed, have to be negotiated and put in place with help of obviously organizations like yours, because you have the experience in the public-private partnership level. You have experience on PPA and IPP negotiation, how to get to
structure
financial close, or at first to FID and financial close. So we have MOUs on the government side. We have MOUs with the Gauteng Economic Development. We have engaged with the KZN and Northwest as well. So we see the opportunity to develop provincial clusters, which then also means that not only in the Vaal region, we can, from our blueprints, is our investigation shows already that we have enough feedstock and so on, we can grow in the Vaal, but we can also grow in the province. That means that projects that develop later on into the cluster then also provide economic benefits in different areas. And that was actually for me, the interesting part when I realized we can develop a green methanol corridor with projects that are smaller, so we can make the green methanol production competitive in a smaller scale than we thought of initially. Obviously, economic scale is always reached by volume, but we can also reach volume to multiplication, because the way that we implement the projects and with our partners, we have partners in our project that come from the automotive industry. So they're used to package solutions, and the solution, and that's why we're starting with a blueprint to package the solution on the technical side, which is important to make it,
and you can replicate it,
to make it get it ready for replication, but also the legal side, all the engagement with the local and the structure of the agreements, the structure of the engagements with the local stakeholders. And then obviously the financial model as well. Once the financial model is proven and the market is proven, then we bring our products to the international market, but also prove some of the application locally. For example, as a pilot, we will run our logistics on methanol trucks, because methanol is a product that can widely be used. And can easily be used as a fuel on existing infrastructure. So that's why I think the proof to use the methanol in our logistics will show how the application works, and also the byproducts out of the circular economy brings us opportunity in giving back or bringing value into the community, because we have clean water as a byproduct. We have phosphate, which is fertilizer, as a byproduct. Obviously, there's oxygen from the hydrogen production. So the byproducts are important for the local side and for our local partners as well, to understand what value can our project bring still out of the circular architecture into the municipality, into the community, and that's why we could multiply and will try to multiply the level then on provincial level, the project on provincial level, and then when we connect the provinces, it creates a corridor. And the corridor initially is the idea, obviously, of the production corridor, but then also to connect to a port, which will naturally for us now be KZN, to look at, or not only look at, but to export initially through Durban, or eThekwini, and via container, and then later look at bulk opportunities of export. And it can even go further across South Africa, obviously, and even into Southern Africa. Maybe there are opportunities replicated further. Yeah, that's why all the stakeholder management is important, and stakeholder management means there are contracts, there are agreements between us and those stakeholders, and that's why we need a strong partner as well to manage that structure.
And I think, and that's touching probably also on, so strong partners, strong support. So from a government perspective, we know that what government has done so you mentioned the commercialization strategy adopted by cabinet. There's a number of other policies, provincial policies, which I think your project is also specifically now going to be part of the provincial master plan for green hydrogen. But so there's a number of policies governments are doing to make sure that projects like yours are successful, and hopefully they get the necessary support. I think one of the important support is probably also the new Green Hydrogen Secretariat, which sits at the IDC. Is any, in terms of your experience with government support, what is your experience, and what is your further expectations? And are there barriers? I think it's important that we also talk about barriers, because then the stakeholders also know that these are the things that we need to deal with constructively. So,
yeah, obviously the industry is looked at as bringing investment into the country and mobilize private investment. So from the project point of view, we don't really expect investment from government. I think one really has to look at structuring the project, that a project can carry itself through the private equity investment. But obviously the first projects need forms of grant funding. Because like in other industry, when you start off, the technology is still expensive, maybe more expensive than in a couple of years, and with volume of deploying electrolyzers, deploying the synthesis in volume.
The levelized cost comes down.
And then the capex goes down. Right now, we have to look at grant opportunities. In the partnership that we are striking between South Africa and Germany, we have those opportunities to look at grant funding. Obviously, the relationship with the DFIs, with the development finance institutions locally, you mentioned the IDC and, for example, DBSA. So it's important to work closely with them.
Yes.
There are very important aspects of what we call the project development phase in the bankable project development phase, which the institutions call the project preparation. There was always a gap between the earlier stage. You go through your concept, pre-feasibility, and then really get to FID. There are challenges, and those are actually the aspects we really have to look into on how to mobilize the project's preparation, and then how to be in close discussion with those stakeholders to see how can those projects need to be structured to comply and then receive the support from the project's preparation part. Because once you get much closer to FID, financial investment decision, or financial close, there are much more interested parties, to look at your project. But when you're still stuck around the bankable feasibility, and there are already substantial costs to at that level of the project development, and that's why again our project hopefully sits at a sweet spot where the project preparation phase still has a budget that is manageable amongst the partners we are now we have now engaged with, and that we are structuring the bankable feasibility with. Because if you have a project that sits at maybe 20 billion rand as a project's implementation budget, a certain percentage of 20 billion is still a huge amount on at risk capital, and at a stage of project preparation, to make sure that budget can be attracted to the project at that phase. So this also shows again that smaller projects hopefully can prove a case with the different elements of the inputs that a project needs. On the feedstock security, on the electricity, the renewables, because the connectivity to the grid is still at the level where it's not creates a huge risk on grid limitations. It doesn't bring a huge risk into the logistics space, where we now have to ask ourselves, do we have enough reliable logistical services to transport the produce or the end product? So we are at a soft spot where all those parameters are on a reasonable level to start. It's not that a project like ours will bring enough change, the change that is needed. We need much bigger project, and we need more projects, but we need projects to start. And those projects, I think, have a benefit if those projects have parameters around them that are easier to achieve right now. That they're easier to achieve from the inputs that the project needs, and then also the outputs that are produced are easier to manage. Easier to manage in terms of the offtake, to bring it into the market, and then prove the market, prove that the input can work, and then scale.
Yeah.
I think that's the most important message from our side, to look at the scale of those projects, because they have parameters that can be managed today. And then those parameters implemented show how we can scale.
How we can scale up.
And then the investors feel more comfortable when they see the first projects coming into the market. So not everything has to jump from gray to 100% green. So
gradually get there.
You can gradually get there. Methanol also helps us to gradually get there, because you can easily blend it in. It's using existing infrastructures. We don't have to change on the logistics side the tanks or the storage facilities. For methanol are the same infrastructure. And they're really easy to now be reused and bring the production into that, and then scale again. And obviously on the local side, we will be involved and discuss with other partners as well, other projects. We like to interact with other projects, with other developers. I'm not saying that every project will have its own hydrogen academy, own skill development center per project. But obviously the industry, and with the Waal SEZ as well, we have discussions to have a regional platform and skill developments. We're working with local partners, non-profit organization like Leparo. Leparo is a company that works with the mining industry as well. Also with stakeholders on the public side, working with the provinces on the program. It's called the Green Economy Support Program, where there we have skill development discussions on what this new green economy needs, what kind of jobs. And that's not only individual jobs, but also looking at regional or local SMMEs. How can we uplift those SMMEs to be suppliers or service providers into the project, which then again has to do with certification. What kind of certification is needed. Sometimes, as I say, you need to walk before you run.
Correct.
And I think, we're starting to walk. maybe still crawling in some areas. But we're starting to walk, and it's a good start, and hopefully proves that obviously South Africa can produce these hydrogen-based products.
Definitely.
Aside from the derivative, as you mentioned, there's obviously opportunity on the manufacturing side, where we look at South African activities to use, in particular, the commodities that are available in our area, to go towards the hydrogen products, whether the fuel cells or the electrolyzers and so on. So there's manufacturing opportunities for sure. So the whole industry, as we said, has multiple levels of opportunities. From my perspective, the derivatives, again, the ammonia and the methanol, I think an early opportunity to just prove and bring products into the exports, into the export markets. To start something, because then automatically we deploy components with the projects. We deploy the components that then eventually also, can be localized. Skill development, technology transfer. Then the opportunities hopefully multiply with the project as well. But the positioning in Gauteng, we hope is something that all the stakeholders will appreciate and see how a project position like ours is just a very unique building block, and it's not the only way to do it. It's something that we want to prove, again, as you mentioned, because of the circular economy, and the opportunities here, and then the scalability. Other projects that we also need are obviously placed in the coastal provinces, and they're very big projects that are placed there, and we hope that the whole industry will deliver to South Africa what we all hope this new economy and this new industry can deliver to South Africa.
Definitely. Thank you, Chris. Again, we appreciate that you took time out of your day to actually come and be with us to do this inaugural podcast. I hope the listeners have found this interesting and insightful, and also just indicates what's happening in the market in South Africa in particular with the green economy. There's a lot of exciting projects, and this is one of those exciting projects that I think will deliver significant opportunities for Gauteng, but more broadly the South African economy in various segments of our society. So we look forward to all of these successes for South Africa. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.